All right, the property prequel, be in the know before you buy. Really excited. Today's guest, I always find when I look, I don't look too much on the back end analytics, but the team always mention the reno, the local couples who are doing the reno, having a crack. They seem to be our most listened to episodes, and they always draw good attention. I think people love the really raw stories and just seeing everyday people in the community doing great things with property. So today's no different. But first, before that, just want to say thanks again, everyone, for sharing and commenting, and just creating a bit of hype around the prequel podcast. Do appreciate it. The whole purpose is to add value to the community out there, and being in the know before you buy. We had Justin Nickerson on in our last episode, one of Australia's best auctioneers, and some of the feedback I've had already just around buyer and seller behavior. So if you are someone looking to get into the market, you may be thinking of selling, or you're thinking of getting into the industry, anything real estate, you have to listen to that on more the psychological side of things. It was amazing. So appreciate all the feedback on that one. Today's app, we've actually got Toni and Michael Bache. So Toni and Michael Bache, I've been watching from afar for a while. I love what these guys do, and it's really cool that we're going to link up and collaborate today, because go follow them to get a bit of context first. So it's Reno, RENO_inspo. Check out their page, and then this will make a lot more sense on where they're at in the journey. And I'm really excited. We had some good questions come in as well, but really excited to unpack, see how they're going. They're about to start their 16th renovation project. So this isn't a case of, that this is their first one. They've done 16. So I'm going to unpack a lot of them to see what the lessons are so we can add back to you guys. But really excited. Toni and Michael, hey, thanks so much for popping in.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. I was going to say when I rocked up here, it's cool that we get to chat. I've seen you guys from afar at different auctions here and there, always having a crack at different things.
Exactly.
Firstly, I always like to start where we'll get to number 16 in a second and the success you guys have had. But where did it all start? Like as people, like where are you guys from?
I grew up on the south side of Brisbane, but came down the Gold Coast to Burleigh every single weekend.
And I was actually born in Adelaide and moved up here when I was quite young, and so I did most of my schooling up here.
Yeah, true. On the on the coast.
On the coast, Somerset.
Right. Somerset. Yeah. Shout out. Well, what about yourself? Whereabouts in South Brizzy?
Canterbury College. So.
Yep. So what suburb did you grow up in?
Forestdale.
Forestdale. Yeah. I'm Forest Lake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good spot. It's different lifestyle down here, that's for sure. And I know a few people from Adelaide made the shift as well. Yeah. And what was it for you guys, like through sort of school, high school? What did you guys envision your lives being back then?
I thought I was going to be a PE teacher.
Yep. Love it. What about yourself, Michael?
I actually thought about doing architecture.
Okay. So I always had that little bit of okay.
I like the technical drawing stuff. So.
Yeah. So did you guys go to uni and
Yep.
And so PE teaching and art?
No. Isn't that the way?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Where did you guys funnel into?
So I went to Griffith on the Gold Coast and I studied business, majoring in marketing and human resources.
Yeah.
So I started off with sports management because I thought I'd go down that route, and then I realised there was no jobs on the Gold Coast in that, and so changed fields. So,
What about yourself?
Yeah, I went to QT and I did industrial design.
Okay.
I did a few streams of engineering beforehand. I did like civil and mechanical engineering for 6 to 12 months before I realised that's not what I want to do. Engineering was too much maths and not enough creativity. So went industrial design, which was a blend for me. So
I was going to say, talking to you off air, you got a bit more personality than some of the engineers I've met. So.
Thanks, mate.
and then so that's a cool, the reason I love just unpacking it gives a bit of the lifting the hood under the brain and kind of what you guys like, and then it's going to be cool. It makes complete sense, actually, now that I think about it, because I was chatting off air. You guys actually own a marketing agency, don't you?
We do.
So what's where What's the name? Give them a plug.
So the marketing agency is Home Marketing Co.
Yep.
But really that was kind of a side business that started because we had a business coaching and consultancy business. And all of our clients, we would be like, you need to do this with your marketing from a strategy standpoint. And they'd try and execute and would, not have the bandwidth to do it themselves and would try to outsource and couldn't find the right people to help them. And they sort of wore us down. And finally we were like, okay, we'll start the agency up to help our clients.
I guess, yeah. So the business coaching, was that just blanket, like helping like business owners scale or function or?
Yeah, we specifically work with women who have got online businesses.
Okay.
So our business coaching business is called Scale Her Success, and it's all about helping women. I mean, it really for me comes from a passion. I found out this statistic that only less than 2% of women hit $1 million in their business, and I was like, that's crap. Like, let's change that statistic because there's so much potential for women to be, doing more. And pretty much every woman that I meet that has any kind of desire to go into business or is already in business, like they all say to me, like, I just feel like I'm made for more. Like I can do more, whether they're staying at home as a mum and they are looking to get more fulfillment, or if they've got a corporate career, but they're feeling as though like, I want to do more. I want to have more freedom. I want to have more flexibility and I want to have more fulfillment. Interesting.
So reason I love going organic and not like I've already seen a bit of an angle here or a bit of a theme where I'm assuming a lot of this business background is going to play a part in the reno side. I'm assuming
maybe less than you think.
Yeah, really. Yeah. I was just going to ask just quickly on the business thing. I love that. So what about yourself, Michael? Did you finish uni and then go into like a job within or?
I did. Yeah. I went into a job within the industry.
Yep.
Nothing in my background, I feel like, led me to property at all. That kind of happened on the side as a bit of an accident, I guess. But yeah, because I always joke that if I had my time again, I wouldn't have done what I did. I'd go back and become a tradie, I reckon.
Really?
Yeah, I'd get on the tools.
I'd vote for that. It would cost us way less if he was on the tools.
Yeah, interesting. And then did you guys go into business together or was it you started it and you or you were doing your thing?
Yeah, we actually had separate businesses. I was doing my own thing on the side and Toni was doing her thing, and we were just kind of constantly referring each other's clients to each other.
Really?
And then we were just like, this is crazy. Like, we should just probably join forces, reimagine what it could be and work together.
What was your background?
So marketing and design.
Oh, yep.
And I was doing sort of like graphic design, web development, that sort of stuff. And Toni was doing like the coaching and strategy stuff.
Epic. For anyone who's thinking of starting a business, to just go on the business side, because you both took that leap. Yep. Any advice there?
Oh, where to begin? I think, we both had big corporate backgrounds before we even started our own businesses, and we started our businesses on the side, and then they just grew and grew and grew to the point that we could go into them full time. And so I think the biggest thing that I see is that people are just like, don't believe in themselves enough and they're not willing to 100%. Jump in and give it a go. And, one of the biggest things that I always say is in business, like, you never fail. Like, you either win or you learn, and 100%. The only time you fail is when you give up. Like, every single time in business, like, you can pivot, you can reimagine, you can do something different, and that's the beauty. And so I'm a big advocate of going for it. Like, of course there's a process you've got to follow. You've got to do your market research. You've got, of course there's steps, but the number one thing that holds people back is themselves and that lack of belief and confidence in themselves.
Wow, that's such good advice there. 100% align with that as well. And then I'm really interested to see you're blending this, you've sort of coming together. The business world's really obviously stimulating you guys and you're enjoying it. Where's the property love start? Like, whereabouts in the journey was this? Was it a separate thing? You both enjoyed it? Like, how did it come together?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting story. So my very first corporate job, I had other jobs before that, but my very first corporate job was with Michael's mum. And she's like, you should meet my son. And like, you guys would be really good together. And then
she'd come home and say, oh, you should meet this girl in my office, Toni. You two would be great together.
No way.
And of course, no one wants their mum to match.
I was going to say,
right?
so Mumsy's done the matchmate.
But like it took a lot of years before we actually went,
we resisted
maybe
it
she's
for a long
right.
time.
Yeah,
like we were friends for such a long time, like really like best of friends.
Oh, good.
And you know, when we were even friends before we were a couple, like we talk about like our dreams and aspirations and stuff. And I think both of us, like we never really talked about like renovation or anything, but we were both like wanted to do the Aussie dream of like having your own home sort of thing. And I got really sick when I was in my early 20s, and I had a cancer scare. I also got like a blood clot in my lung. And so I was like really unwell, and I just came home after that and I was like, screw it. You know, I've got enough money to saved to like jump in and buy a house. I was just too scared of doing it. So I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it. And it just so coincided with the time that Michael and I were getting really serious. So we actually moved in together when I bought my first home, and then like Michael moved in and he hasn't left yet. So.
Yeah, how good. I love that. that. So it was more of you guys were chatting around property, and it kind of aligned, and so went from there,
I think to carry on from Toni's point, like when we first moved into that first property in Koala Park, it wasn't a brand new home. Like it was an older home that needed some new love, and that's probably where our passion started. Like we're like, oh, what can we do? We've finally got our own place. What color can we paint the walls, and what can we change and make our own? And I think that's probably where it really began.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and what sort of dwelling was that? Like house, unit?
It was a duplex.
Duplex.
Yeah.
Love it. Because the reason I ask is people generally, how old would you have been, just roughly?
24, 23, 24.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Reason is I speak to a lot of people in the exact same shoes as like they see people like yourselves and see these other people as a family doing their thing. But what I notice is that they might be in their early 20s, first property, and they just want to get in the market. Maybe all they can get is a unit or a duplex. They've got big aspirations. So right now, just sort of shows you guys didn't just fall into a banger home and renovated it. It's like
not at all.
You've sort of grinded. It sounds like you've grinded this out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like massively, and like lived through GFC, and like it's really funny. Like I get a lot of people that message us on Insta and they're like, oh, you're so lucky, and like I do feel incredibly blessed and grateful, but like it's not been like this magic overnight success where we woke up millionaires and like our parents like bankrolled us to like have this mansion. Like it wasn't, it was hard work.
And a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah, a lot of sacrifice.
Well, I'm keen to peel that journey back, because you heard it here first. They started off just like a lot of you listeners right now. So take note. We're about to unpack the journey. So first property. Just give us the first one's always everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
Give us a quick idea what it was. Like, did you rent it out, or did you end up selling it?
So that was the one that we actually only sold a few weeks ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we held on to it for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Epic.
But like during that time did multiple renovations, ended up knocking it down, like rebuilding on the same block. So yeah, it's we held on to it for a long time. So we moved into it, and then we eventually moved out to buy another property and take advantage of like not having to pay CGT.
Yes,
and
capital gain,
so then we rented it out, and then we moved back into it once we had redeveloped it.
Yes, love it.
Yeah.
Just quickly on the CGT, so anyone listening, capital gains tax, obviously chat to your accountant on those sorts of things. But did you make use of the threshold? So you moved back in before certain period of time?
No, we didn't. I guess unfortunately from a capital gains perspective, but I guess fortunately for life experience, we moved away for 10 years. So we did 2 years in Sydney and 8 years in Europe. And so that kind of precluded us from moving back in, and, we had to deal with the capital gains, but just for that period that, it was outside of that. So
it's a good little tip there, because some younger generation people or anyone starting they want to do what you guys are doing. There is some strategies there. Obviously chat to your accountant around, you can live in it, flip, move away, and then move back
Exactly.
before a certain threshold and time.
And that was our plan.
Yeah.
We were just having too much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
abroad.
Yeah.
We were like, oh, well, like, you
Yeah.
know, it's just money. You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Love it. Love it. So that first one, firstly, we'll go on the sale in a second, but what was that whole process like? Like your first reno, like what were the biggest struggles you found, like taking yourself back to those days? Like, was there anything you really regret, or you just knowing what you know now? Obviously, you were blind back then. What would you have changed, you think?
I don't think there was any regret. I think it was just jumping in the deep end. Like we didn't back then. Like we were, even that very first property, we were like, you know, living like kind of paycheck to paycheck. Like you don't have like a lot of financial resources. You can't just go and hire trades to come in and do what you want to do. Like you figure it out yourself.
And this was the olden days before like YouTube was a big thing.
This was before Bunnings.
Yeah.
But you'd go to your hardware, like you'd just figure it out. You'd ask your dad or your father-in-law, like, hey, how do I do this? And he'd have a few tools that you could borrow and you'd just figure stuff out.
Yeah.
I can't think of any epic failures that we had, but
You're just kind of doing it and learning.
Yeah.
Were you on the tools?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, I mean, in those early renos, like certainly now we leverage trades more, but in those early renos, it was 100% us and family pitching in to help us, and none of our family have got trades backgrounds either. So,
and you're right. These days, flood of knowledge, whether it's YouTube, courses, all those sorts of things. So for you guys, it was just literally just
like
learning.
Honestly, trial and error. And I think like, you know, in hindsight, like I don't want to say we got lucky, but like I'm a little bit of an OCD planner, and Michael's like just one of those really handy kind of people. So I feel like we've never really, knock on wood, like hopefully it doesn't happen, but we've never really had any like epic stuff ups or anything that we've looked back and gone, oh, that was a big regret of ours. Like I think we look back and go, oh my gosh, like all of those decisions that at the time we were like, should we do this or shouldn't we? We're like, oh, we kind of made the right decision. But you know, like our renovations have evolved so much. Like sometimes we see photos back from those days, and this was like pre-iPhone, so they're like, you know, dodgy photos, and like I look at our like our styling and like some of our selections, and I'm like, what the heck?
Questionable.
Bit questionable,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But we also treated it like an iteration, like, you know, like we're Gen Y, right? And so we're supposed to be those impatient millennials. Like I get it, but I think now sometimes that because of Instagram and Pinterest and everything, there's this whole belief that even when you're super young, you have to have this like perfect house right from the outset, and you've got to, you know, like have this, I don't know, showroom home. Like when we had that first house, like, you know, our lounge was a day bed that was like my bed from when I was a kid that we turned into a lounge. And
we had
like,
grandma's dining table and
grandma's
chairs.
dining table and chairs. Like everything we had was like a hand me down. We had this like tiny box TV that we didn't even watch because it was too small. And like my dad, who loves TV, took pity on us and bought us a big TV because he's like, you can't live with that. That's so terrible. But like we had nothing, and like our house looked nothing. But you know, as you know, we did one renovation, and then like as we got more money, like, you know, our renovations like kept improving because we improved our skills, we got more money, we got more style sense, you know, all of that stuff. So I think it's a big thing to, you know, you don't have to do it all perfectly the first time. It's like an iteration and an iteration and an iteration.
And it is a long game. It's not you don't get in and make a quick win and then get out. Like it is a long game.
I was going to just touch on that. So just so people who are at that early stage of the flipping and want to scale, how did you guys fund, because there was a question we had later which we can dive into, but in terms of like funding that first one, like is there any key points you can give to people there on, that's some people's biggest struggle, is that bottleneck on how to fund the next one? Like were you guys drawing like equity, or was it like obviously the sale come later, or was it you were just grinding hard with the business and leveraging?
Yeah, so at the time we were both working in corporate, and we were like, I mean, it wasn't much money, but I guess it was decent money for the age we were at and stuff. So like it was decent, and so we were just saving, like, you know, we made sacrifices, like
we didn't have holidays.
We didn't do fancy holidays. We didn't, you know, like go and buy a new outfit every weekend.
We had
going
old
out clubbing.
cars.
We had we had old cars. Like we still we got rid of one car in, what was it, like 2008?
Yeah,
and we're still a one car family now. Like, you know, and that was, now it's like by choice, but by then it was like a sacrifice, because we're like, well, we can afford a second car, but if we do, then that's going to limit our choices with property. So there wasn't really any magic bullet for the first one. And then for the second one, yes, we used some equity and some savings. And then the third one, you know, it like kind of went from there, but like there was no magic, like do this hack. I'd probably say the only hack we did, and I don't know the rules now, but back then as long as you hadn't been living together for 12 months, you weren't considered a de facto. And so we actually bought our second property less than 12 months after our first, because the first one was my property. I was doing it with or without him. The second one, we were like, we knew we were a real thing, but Michael got it in his name, and it was his property, because we could take advantage of the capital gains on both, but also the deduction, but also the first home buyers grant on both. So that was probably the only like hack that we did back then, but everything else was just normal. Like, you know, there's
sacrifice and hard work.
100%. Some key things there. Firstly is understanding it. It's just, I always put it this way, like it's not rocket science, like property. And as you guys know, like it really isn't, but there are some key things. If you educate yourself with the game, and that's the way I see it, it's like, everyone knows how to play like Monopoly or something. Some people are better than others because they understand the little rules and little things like that. Like that's a big one for anyone in this phase of, you know, maybe you're doing your first one or you're up to number 1 or 2 or 3. Entities, names, you know, those buying versus in a structure versus your personal name or as a couple. Look into that, chat to accountant, because that's huge.
Totally.
You gave some really good advice there, which is epic.
And I think on that, Matt, like back then, like I said before, I'm like a little bit of a like researcher and all of that stuff. But I used to live there. This is the olden days. Like I was on a forum. I think it was called Summersoft or something like that. And I was like on this forum like every day, every night, like looking at what other people were doing and what they were saying about capital gains tax and first home buyers grant and negative gearing. And like this was people that were much more advanced than what I was back then. And I just used to just pour over these forums and ask dumb questions. People would like be happy to help. And now it's, you know, we've got even more access, you know, with the internet, you know, being much more established than what it was back then. But, you know, we've got Instagram, we've got YouTube, we've got courses. There's just so much opportunity for you to educate and ask. And like, I would just, you know, if you really want to make this something that's part of your lifestyle, like, you know, take the time to really embed yourself in it. So
what I'm hearing there is be curious and ask questions. Number one, I find that's the most successful in this game is they're always asking curious. They're being curious. And one thing I always say is there's new levels, new devils. So, you know, you're at a different stage of your journey now, which we'll get to. There's probably new things you're learning where it's like completely different back. Totally. You wouldn't even known that stuff back at number one. So if we roll through, this is where I feel people struggle is sort of number 2 to 6-ish for various reasons. Finance, you know, they're understanding banks and different things like that. Tell us the early days, say 2 to flip. Yeah, you've done 16 total. Tell us that sort of 2 to 6-ish kind of. Was there any kind of drawback, or what did you feel was getting you momentum to go sort of quicker? Like what was the cadence? Was it like really slow, or did you find by number 2 or 3 or 4, whatever, it started to really, you had a good system and process and you were funneling through? Yeah.
So I think for us, like the first couple were the hardest because we bought one and that was kind of, you know, a stretch. It's like the scary one. Yep. And then the second one we were like, okay, we kind of felt like let's do it while we can take advantage of those capital gains and first home buyer grant advantages. And so that was a bit of a stretch. But when we bought number one, it was a part of a duplex and we always wanted to buy the second part of the duplex. And we talked to the owner and he's like, no, I'm never selling. And we're like, okay, well, let us know if you're ever going to. And then one day it's just randomly on the market and we're like, dude, like seriously.
We come home and find the sign out.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're like, seriously. And so, but the annoying thing was we had just bought the second one not long previously. We were already stretched. we really wanted it, but we were also getting married at the same time. So we like had just bought another house, so we were stretched. We were getting married. Like there was a lot going on. And so, but we could just see the vision that like if we owned both sides of the duplex, 100%. That would give us so much potential in the future to do something more with that block. And so we were like, okay, I think we literally said balls to the wall. Like, like we are like going deep on this one. And like we said to our families, like, you know, we're going deep here. Like we're not asking you for money, but like it's going to be tight. And so we actually, we at that point, we did it. But we got the loan and everything, like, you know, they always tell you can do it, right? But that was right at the beginning of the GFC.
Oh, wow.
And so we paid high and we knew, like, we paid 120 grand more less than 2 years later for the same duplex, right? And these are like duplexes that are only worth like 300 to 400, right? So like that's a big percentage increase. And so we made sacrifices. Like we literally moved into my parents' garage. So we like converted their garage to a granny flat.
Really?
And so, we were newly married.
Really? And rented them out?
Rented them out.
To get some extra cash, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we
Smart.
then had the 3 places rented out. And so I think like for me, that's the thing. Like, I don't know that it necessarily ever gets like a lot easier. Like you do have to make the sacrifices, but doing that when we were young has set us up to be able to do a lot more now when we're older. And I think like our biggest challenge that we faced is because we chose to move over abroad, which we have no regrets, like was such a fantastic experience, but you couldn't do a lot from over there. Like, cause you're not a tax resident of Australia. So you're subject to so many, you know, restrictions around purchasing. Because you're not a citizen abroad, you can't really purchase over there, and then they have funky rules and all of that sort of thing. So we felt like our biggest challenge was we felt like we kind of lost like 10 years of time in the middle. And so I think that was our biggest challenge. But like we've just kind of constantly, you know, bought, renovated, lived in it, rented it, probably renovated again, you know, like we've kind of just done that whole process of we've never looked at property as like a short-term flip. We've always looked at it for the long term, and we've always very deliberately bought in blue chip areas. Like for a long time, the property that we held, the values didn't go up a lot. Like if we would have sold, we would have made a tiny bit, but probably by the time you took out holding costs and stuff, not a lot. But what mattered was constantly adding value and then holding for enough time for you to also to add value through renovations, but also to get extra value through holding over time.
I really love that. There's a few things I've peeled away from that, and it's some advice I give to some people who are doing the flip as well. In blue chip locations, generally there's always a short supply of rentals as well, because blue chip is where all the owner occs are at.
Exactly.
And everyone wants to be, they're well kept, they're good lifestyle. To get tenants into there, they'll pay to be in those suburbs. So what happens is when you do these flips and you are in a position where you rent it out, you're gonna get good rent. So that can offset, obviously. And if the market's not where it needs to be on the sales side for your fees or whatever, potentially look at what these guys have said. Could you rent it out for a period of time, accumulate the cash flow, which is good income for the banks and all those sorts of things, and then, you know, sell when ready? Is that kind of the approach you guys took?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, it was. And
interesting.
That's why we made the sacrifice to move back into the garage, because that was the only way that we could hold our property, was to make the sacrifice. Because that was really important to us, that we held on to that duplex. We worked hard to get it. We don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
So the interest rates were going,
and the interest
nuts,
rates were like crazy, and we'd locked in fixed rates, and we're like,
they were coming off the cliff.
We thought you did the right thing, and then they went up, and then they came down, and we're like, oh my God, like, have we made, like, you're always questioning, have we made the right decision? Yes. Now we look back and go, of course we made the right decision, because we came out on the right side of it. But at the time, you'd never know. You just got to do what you think is right, but go all in.
And initially it was negatively geared, but it was like enough that we could like still afford that gap. But it didn't take long before they became positively geared, because rentals keep going up and we kept adding value with more renos and different things. So I feel like for me that's always been our strategy, and I don't really see us changing that. There was definitely times where we looked at property that was more risky. Like we looked at mining areas and all of that stuff. And, sometimes you can get in, get out quick and make your cash, but it's all a little bit of like luck of the draw. Like 100%. It just takes a mind. Yeah, it just takes a mind to close down and you're screwed. And so for us, like we will always, look primarily at blue chip. We'll always look primarily to buy and hold before we flip, because neither of us have a trade. Yes, again, you can buy and flip quickly, but you're reliant pretty much on the market, because unless you've got a trade and you can cut out builder's margin and do all of the work yourself, you can't usually make enough value that it's worth paying, any you've got your buying and selling costs, you've got your holding costs, you've got your stamp duty, all of that stuff. You've got to actually make a decent amount to make it really worthwhile. And it's too risky to, just be reliant on that. And we've seen some people, we were talking about this before, some people bought, just a couple of years ago expecting to be able to flip it quickly and make money, and they haven't, because you're reliant on the market too much, and you can't always forecast what's going to happen there.
I was going to say, so the mindset going into each deal in the early days was around, obviously you want to buy well, but so you would flip at a point in time, is that but you weren't always committed to like, we need to flip this in 12 months.
No.
Yeah.
No. And particularly the first, like the duplex pair we bought, like we always saw the long-term vision of like renovating and doing like a bigger reno to both. Like we didn't see the vision we were going to knock down and do what we did. Like what it ended up being was way bigger than the vision we had, but we could just see that potential. So we knew it was a long-term thing. Yeah.
Wow. Then what about in that journey? So you went away traveling overseas. What property, how many have you done when you went away?
So while we were away, we only did a few smallish renos because they weren't like...
Oh, so you were doing stuff whilst overseas?
Yeah, we did a couple. So we did a bunch here before we left. We did a couple overseas, but they were pretty small scale. Because like our renovations we've done, like we talk about 16, but some have been pretty minimal cosmetics, and some have been let's knock down and rebuild 2 homes. So there's a pretty vast range of them. But we did a couple overseas. We also, because we've done in that 16 is a few we've done for family as well. And so we had a few nightmare return trips to Australia where we were coming back to relax and see family, and instead we were like,
on the tools.
On the tools.
I remember literally New Year's Eve midnight strikes where we're covered in paint, going Happy New Year at like one of my family's properties. Michael slices his thumb open, has to like go to emergency.
No way.
It was like, this was...
what are we doing? This is not a holiday.
Exactly. And like, it's kind of one of those things where we like whinge about it, but we kind of secretly love it as well.
Yeah.
So,
there's definitely a passion there. You can tell straight away you guys are loving it. So in this piece, so PAYG, where did the when he's become like self-employed, like where was this before you went away or after?
No, so when we were abroad, so we always had businesses on the side, like literally ever since we bought that first house. I remember
always had a little side hustle.
Like every single night we'd go into the office and we'd sit there and we'd visualize, and we had clients and stuff, but it was always like on the side of our day jobs. And it wasn't until we were over in Europe that we just saw the opportunity for the side business to get bigger. Michael was working full-time for himself over there, but I was still working in corporate, and then we just saw this opportunity for it to go bigger, and so then we went for it, and so Michael was kind of doing it full-time, I was doing it part-time, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we always knew we wanted to come back to Australia, and specifically to the Gold Coast, very specifically to Burleigh, and very specifically to Kuala Park. That was the dream, was to come back. But the role that I held, like those jobs didn't exist on the Gold Coast. And so I was constantly having this exit plan of like, I want to come back, but how can I come back and, make the money I'm making now and do something I love doing and I feel challenged with doing, but live in Kuala Park. And so and that was really like the catalyst to push us to jump in and go full time in the business. So just like over a few years we kind of did the hybrid balancing both, and then got the business to the point where we could go all in on it.
Which again links back to like making the sacrifice. Like it's not a comfortable time working hard in corporate, Tony traveling every other week to the US for work and trying to run a business on the side, but build that business on the side. Like there's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of sleepless nights trying to make it all work, but for that longer vision of knowing it'll be worth it when we get the payoff at the end. And it's the same as the very first property, a lot of sacrifices, but you know, if you stick to your vision, you'll get there. Like it just takes consistency and of work
and discipline. And one thing I'm noticing with you guys, everything you've said, you always have a vision, like a end in mind. And it's from that, you know, the 7 habits of highly successful people. They always say start with the end in mind. And it seems like 100%. You guys are big on that, hey?
Totally. And I feel like, and you know, I know we're going to talk about it, but I feel like when we did the redevelopment, it was kind of weird because we'd had all of these goals for so long, like live on the Gold Coast, live in Koala Park, like have an amazing house, like work for ourselves, have freedom and flexibility, like live near the beach. And we kind of like, we're like, oh crap, like we hit all the goals. Like it seemed like, you know, sometimes goals seem so far away and like you're never going to achieve them. And it took us like 15 plus years to get there, but we got there. And then we got there and we were like, oh crap, now what? Like it was sort of a weird thing because for so long that was the goal.
What was
and then
driving us.
And then it happened and we're like, oh, okay. Like, you know, like you said before, new level, new devil. Like what do we do now? So
it's interesting, isn't it? I always talk around, it's generally the journey, not the destination, right?
Totally.
And we're going through your journey now and it seems like the amount of lessons and the growth between you guys is that's the gold, right?
That is the gold.
Yeah, that's the gold. All the learnings in there. I was just going to say, how did it go from turning into PAYG into business owners when that time came in terms of financing deals?
Yeah.
Is there anything there? Because a lot of people don't understand the difference between a salary versus you want to start a business but keep doing property.
Yeah.
There's a bit of roadblock there.
There sure is. So to be perfectly transparent with you, we've always had really bad experiences with the banks, like even as PAYG. So when I went to get my first loan, the bank manager literally said to me, you're a woman, you're going to get pregnant soon. You know, you probably don't want to have a house. You should probably buy shares instead. And I was like,
wow, no.
And I was
I'll
like,
show you.
watch me, buddy. Like, so I went to another bank, got a loan. And then kind of over the years, then we sort of just kind of hummed along. So we were taking a bit of equity, getting another loan, and it was all sort of fine. And then when we went to do the redevelopment, like they were just a freaking nightmare. Like it was so hard. We got so mistreated, like to the point where they ended up admitting fault and giving us thousands of dollars back and all of that stuff. But it was just so painful. And so when we went to do like our more recent deals, when we've been working for ourselves, I was just like, screw the banks. Like I don't want to deal with them. Like they are just way too painful. And I know, you know, with a good broker and a good bank manager that we could have got the financing, but, you know, banks just don't love businesses, right? And they just make it hard and we just couldn't be bothered. So we decided, because we weren't actually planning on selling our more recent project that we sold. So if we would have planned it more, we probably would have sold that, taken the cash and done the next project. But we actually pulled it out of other investments because we were just like, we don't want to be dealing with the banks and having all the drama. We don't want to sell this property or feel forced to. So thankfully, we'd also invested in shares over the years. And so we had shares. So we sold shares to fund and just paid cash for our most recent property. It's possible. Like we've got tons of entrepreneurial friends, and trust me, like they all managed to get home loans, but no one's like, it was so easy and so fun and it was so amazing. And certainly I would say our experience talking to all of our friends is that people always have better luck with brokers rather than going directly to the bank.
That's a really good point there. So key one there is the difference between broker and bank. In a nutshell, a bank will obviously show you their packages and services. You went to any of the big four or whatever, obviously they're going to promote their own. A broker will generally get access to all of the banks, all the different rates. And a good broker, this is the difference, there's brokers and there's good brokers. A good broker should be looking at your position, your goals. If you want to build a portfolio as well, they need to think of the 6th, 7th property as well and not cap you ceiling wise. So that's a really good tip there. Understand that sometimes a broker could be good if you want to build for the long term.
Absolutely. And the one thing I'd add as well, Matt, just because I've seen a few people make this mistake, is there's really good brokers that can pretty much get a loan for anyone, right? Like doesn't matter what your situation is, they can make magic and make it happen. But I think you've also got to look at like your personal ability to service the loans, because I've seen a lot of people where they've managed to get loans, but now we've had these recent interest rate hikes and people are like, oh my gosh, like I'm struggling to afford it.
Yep.
And so like I would always say, get the numbers from the banks or from a broker on like what can I afford to borrow, but also do your own numbers on like what can I afford to pay. Because when Michael and I, when we went through that really difficult time in the GFC where the interest rates were going up and we were like that really, at the time we had forecasted for interest rate rises, but not as much as what there was. Yeah. And so now we're like uber conservative and, now like we've had, 12 rate rises and like we've not even thought twice about it. Whereas back then it was scary. And so I would just say like plan for the worst. Like I think at one point we were paying like 12 or 13% interest. I remember my parents in the 90s were paying 24% interest, like just like really like whatever you think the worst case scenario is, like add a bit of buffer in well, because you just never want to be in that situation where you're risking like losing what you've worked so hard for because you've gotten carried away with what you can borrow versus what you can actually afford. That whole living
beyond your means and trying to get to the end goal too soon. Like I think there's something in having patience for the long game and living where you are now, not where you think you're going to be in 5-10 years.
Love it. That's gold. If you could speak to, because I think this will hit home to some people where the interest rate environment is, if you could speak to someone right now who's back in your shoe, it sounds like you pretty much went through kind of what people are going through right now. Yeah. They might have secured, they've finally got into the market.
Yep.
They might have purchased 12 months ago. They've had the interest rate hike of doom. They're thinking, actually, this is hurting. I know where I want to be. I want to be like Toni Michael, those sorts of things. What's a piece of advice, speaking to those people right now that are on that fence, kind of like, is this for me?
I would say, it is for you. I think you got to lock in, and I think to Tony's point, you got to work out what can I actually afford, and that might be giving up the fancy lattes out every morning, or
the Euro holiday. Who's not in Europe this summer?
Yeah, exactly. All those people going to Europe. Yeah, making those sacrifices, because like a sacrifice now will yield, 5 times its value in a few years. Yeah, because of that whole compounding effect. So if you can 100%. Save that little bit extra now, you'll reap that reward in a few years' time. But you just got to stick it out and have that belief that this is worth it and I'm on this journey. But it's hard when you don't surround yourself with people that think like that, because you get dragged into the groupthink of, I got to have it now. I got to go out and have my breakfast out every morning and live the lifestyle. So it's like you just have to be convinced of your own beliefs,
of what you believe. What you want. And it goes back. I'm picturing you guys, moving into parents' garage.
Exactly. We sold a car, went down to one car. We moved into the garage. We we were like really frugal back then.
It's not glamorous as a newlywed couple.
And even now, we're in a relatively comfortable financial position now, and there's certainly some things we splurge on. Like we know what we value and we splurge on, but there's so many other things that we don't, and it's a very conscious decision. We were talking, actually I think it was only last night, we had this fancy holiday booked for this year, but because we bought the other house, we were like, okay, well, technically we can afford to still do the fancy holiday and have the house, but it just doesn't seem prudent to do that. So we cancelled the fancy holiday. It's, I don't know, I think it's just it doesn't matter where you are. You've always got to think about, back to your point before, the vision, the end game. And if the end game is that you want to have wealth and you want to have that comfortable retirement and you want to enjoy your life, and not ever have to worry about money, you have to constantly be thinking about the long-term game and what's an investment and what's something that's going to actually set you up for the future versus what's a short-term warm and fuzzy that makes me feel good that I've got the new outfit or I've got the trip or I've got the latte or whatever it is.
Wow. Rewind some of that. That's gold. It's key thing I'm taking away there. You guys really focus on delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Seems like you guys have got good, and it seems like as well, I'm just picking up, probably don't care too much. Your ego doesn't seem too stimulated. I've noticed that when I first met you. But there is a lot of people, especially younger ones, that would hurt the ego going back to mum and dad's in a garage, I'm sure, and sold a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, I guess like we didn't advertise to all our friends we were living in the garage at the time. Like we went like, look at us,
Yeah,
we're so frugal, like we're living in the garage. And
Yep.
like I remember I like went for a job and I'm like, my address is like, I won't say it on
Yeah,
podcast,
yeah.
but like I was just like giving my parents' address
Yep.
because I didn't want to be like, yes, I live in my parents' garage, you know, like but at the same time, like we knew like what the long-term goal was. And
so you knew it was going to be, this is a period of time. I'm going to grind it out.
Yep.
Stay patient.
Exactly.
Yep.
And, you know, like our life didn't suck, right?
Yep.
You know, I was talking to a friend the other day and he's like an expert around wealth and he's a financial planner and all of that stuff. And he was talking about, you know, you can't wait for your second life. So you can't like have all of the sacrifice now so that when you retire, you know, you've got this nice life because you don't know, like nothing's a guarantee. Like life is limited. It might all end for us tomorrow, right?
True.
So it was always like that balance. We still had a nice life, but you can have a nice life and make your coffee at home. You can have a nice life and, you know, go to the beach at Burleigh and walk along the beach instead of like going to the beach in Italy. You know, like you can still hang out with friends, but do a picnic in the park rather than going to a fancy dinner. So for us, like, yes, it felt like sacrifice. Like we hated living under my parents and like hearing them dum 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 above us. And, you know, like, and it was like tiny. It was literally like a 1-car garage converted. We put a bathroom in there. We put a living room in there. We put a bedroom in there and a ton of storage. And like, I don't know, but it just,
you knew what the end game was. Wow, I love that. Then where did it start to, because it sounds like it's expanded a lot, because I've seen some of your development, you've been splitting things and doing all that jazz and duplexes and where did the knowledge accept, like you gone from cosmetic paint to cutting land in half and building 2 homes?
Yeah.
Where did you start expanding that knowledge?
So when we moved back from overseas, we were looking for our kind of, using inverted commas, forever home.
Yeah.
And we looked at a ton of property all over the Gold Coast, mostly on this southern end because that's where we wanted to be. And we couldn't find anything that we liked.
Yep.
And so we went back to the duplexes that we still owned that were rented out in Koala Park. And we thought, well, maybe now's the time to redevelop them and to renovate them. And that's what we thought. We went into it thinking we were going to renovate them, might add a bedroom, change the garage, nothing too major, maybe go up a level. That was it. Spoke to a few people and everyone was unanimous and like, you might as well just knock it down and rebuild. And we were like, what? Like, we can't do that. And then the more we thought about it and the more we saw the opportunity of what that could look like, we're like, okay, I think that's the option. I think we got to knock them down. And that was scary. It's like,
oh, I bet.
Like, I'll never forget the day that we went there when the demo team had come in and there's just a pile of rubble left. And we're like, there is literally no going back. Like, just demolished everything.
And all the cash flow that come out of that, you've got rid of it. Yeah.
Empty block that's worth nothing now. It's not producing income. You are
all in.
Yeah. And we learnt along the way the trials and tribulations of dealing with council and getting approvals and all of that stuff. We learnt in the trenches.
Going through
we tried to surround ourselves with the best people we could find, and that certainly helps, but it doesn't take away from the experience of going through it and just learning on the fly, making quick decisions, and I think throughout all of it just being on the same page. We had a vision of what we wanted, and we would just move heaven and earth to make that vision come true, and not accepting challenges or no for an answer, going, okay, if we can't do that, how do we do it? Then what do we have to do? But there was a lot of learning.
So much. And like, even like that project wasn't that long ago. It was only 3 years ago and a little more than that now. But even now I look back and I'm like, man, like we had no idea what we were doing. Like, you know, and like we educated ourselves a little bit. We did the 3 Birds reno school and styling school, but like, I don't know. I didn't feel like people are always like messaging us for advice on our Insta, and we're so happy to help, like always so willing to help. But I have to remind people sometimes, like people have messaged me and be like, hey, can you like style my house or can you help me do this? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea. Like I've like literally learnt from trial and error. And and made like luckily no massive mistakes, but made mistakes. And
sounds like you just got to lean into it.
That's it.
And have a crack.
And for us, we looked at like, fortunately we already had the land, or the duplex, but we were looking at like the price we were going to spend to buy our new house and not get what we wanted. Like it wasn't going to be in the location we wanted, the finishes weren't what we wanted, the layout wasn't what we wanted. The cost to do that was going to be the same as the cost to do the build for the other two. And so we're like, well, if we get two for the price of one, like it's like that was kind of our rationale, like might as well go.
And then once we decided that was what we were doing, then the goal was how do we maximize the value of what we've got there? Because if we're dealing with a blank slate, how do we maximize that?
Yeah.
And that was essentially the brief to the building designer was like, okay, we've got this blank slate. Here's our little list of criteria of what we want in a home, but how do we maximize the value?
And just to add to that though, what we want in the home was like this much and what we thought we needed for the market in the area was
very
this
different.
much. Like, so the house that we built, like we love it. And like, I still like, I miss that house a little bit, particularly because we're now not living in a beautiful brand new home that we custom designed. Yep. But it was never our dream home because we built it for the market, whether it was to rent or sell or, you know, Airbnb or whatever we were going to do with it. We never built it just for us. And I think that's, you know, back to what you were saying before about blue chip, it's like, yes, you want to live where you want to live, but look at, you know, where is it in relation to shops and public transport and schools, and like the same as when you're building or renovating, look at, yes, what do you want, but also look at what does the market always look for around there and like talk to agents. Like, you know, we would call like agents and be like, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. What do
we spoke to a
look
number
for?
of agents in the area that had expertise in what the market wanted to find out.
And it was like small compromises for us. Like, oh, we've got like too many bedrooms. Like that's not a huge sacrifice, but like it meant that it was a much more saleable asset when we went to sell it.
So again, end in mind, you're always thinking, this is to sell. Yep. Great point there. So that's one of my favorites. We had Zephyr and Stone on it as well, and she's done some amazing things there. And one of her key tips is similar to you guys. I see the most successful in this space. They're always thinking, what's the market? It's like product market fit. Yep. Always thinking where you're buying, locations, everything, and then what's the demographic or what is going to be the most saleable asset. So I love what you said there. Then what if you were to highlight 3 key points to come out of that development process, because a lot of people, it is scary for them. What's 3 key points in the development process that you could give to anyone out there in that scared zone that they want to do their first one?
I think the first one, I'll jump in the first one, give you time to think. The first one I would say is like we didn't go with the cheapest builder. We went with a builder who was super established, who we had seen a lot of his work, and we knew that the quality of his work was insane.
Yes.
We like had personal friends that had used him and recommended him. And I think like when I see a lot of issues going with developments, it's because you don't have a great builder. So like PJH was so incredible. We had such a good relationship. Like we're still friends with all the guys now, and like we'll probably use them for our next projects because we just trust them. Like we know they do a good job. And I think that's important. And sometimes people are so worried about like the short term money of like, oh, but that builder's X amount more. But you've got to have someone that's really got your back, does great quality work, and you can trust, and someone that's, you know, flexible. Like there was things on the fly where, you know, the guys would say to me, Toni, I don't think that's going to look really good. And I'm like, hell, you're right. Like, let's quickly change that. But you need someone that's going to say that and do that. So
that's a good one. So ones that, don't skimp on the build quality, like the builder.
100%. Because that's a saleable asset at the end of the day, is what you got left with.
True.
So you want it to be the best it can be.
And you want to have a good experience. You don't want them to keep like adding on all these random expenses or not letting you make changes on the fly. And,
or letting you down on timelines. It's like it was all those things.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a really good tip.
It comes back to that whole, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, 100%.
Almost.
Yeah.
I think another big one was a lot of planning went in up front. Like we did as much work pre-demolition as to what we did post-demolition, like the number of months. Like we just spent a lot of time obsessing over plans, questioning things, questioning ourselves. Is that really the best solution for what we want? Admittedly, we didn't change much in the plans, but we just thought about them a lot.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of pre-planning to
just
make
on
it happen.
that's an awesome tip, because once that demo's gone, holding costs, there's no income basically generating, right? So you want to be using as much time in that planning process whilst you could have some potential income coming in, right? So that's a really, really good tip. So do the due diligence, have everything set, then demo, rather than I see some people get stuck. They do the demo and then try to think on the feet as they go. So the planning process. So, and what would one more be if you were to, in that sort of development side of things that you're really learning?
I think a big one for us was having a vision of what we wanted it to be, because that vision guides all your decision making throughout the project. Like, there's so many questions come up and so many opportunities come up. Like, you see a new product or you see something else on Pinterest, or you get questioned, is this how you want to do it? And it's very easy in the moment to go, oh yeah, I think I want to change that bench top, or I think I want to do a different kitchen layout. But if you go against your vision, or if you've got a vision, it's easy to like make a decision. Is that right or is that not right? And it just saves you a whole lot of time because you just keep coming back to the vision. What does it have to look like? What do I want at the end? And it just helps in that decision making throughout the project.
Wow, that's a really good one. So to summarize that, it sounds like the big three in that development. So if you're someone right now, you're thinking you're scared to take that leap, the first thing they said earlier was you're not going to know it all. You literally have to take the leap. That's probably the first thing I took away. But then the key learnings on the way, the first one is builders aren't, I agree 100%. And I didn't even think of that. But yeah, are choosing not the cheapest builder, the one that aligns with you and is reputable, because time frames, all those things are huge.
I mean, we've seen so many builders go under now.
That's a huge point. So get knowledgeable on, do due diligence on builders. The second one is do the planning process before bulldozing, because you can sort of save a lot of time. You could potentially have some income whilst limiting holding costs. And the third one, I love it, sticking the project on the vision that you had from the start, because a project doesn't come about in 1 week. It can take time, and there's going to be opportunities thrown at you. You'll see shiny new things. And
I remember like towards the end of the project, like, well, not the end, but you were well into it, and this company approached us and was like, hey, we want to collaborate with you and we want to give you this stuff at like this ridiculous discount. And we're like, yes. And then we were like, wait, that doesn't fit with the vision. And we were like, no. And
love it.
And so, but like, it would have been easy to get carried away and say yes to something like that. But if we would have, I know it would have compromised the end product. So it's again, like, just keeping the end in mind, a bit of a theme there.
Massive theme. And it's a bit like, I know you guys are in the business consulting world. It's like with any business, the identity, the vision of the, that's the recruitment that aligns with the vision, the choices you make align with the vision. So it's really cool that you apply that to your projects.
Yeah.
So I know we said it before, but it is like little mini businesses really, and
it's so the same, Matt, because seriously, like, what I love about real estate and why I have a strong preference for real estate over other investments is like you can add value to it, right?
Touch and feel it, add value.
You can like literally you can take something and you can do something with it and control how what it's worth and control what you do with it, whereas if it's shares, you're sort of putting it in other people's hands, and I feel like that's the same with business, is like you can control it, like you can you can add value to it, you can do different things, but in both cases, like, you need to know what the market wants to do, you need to have the vision, like it's the same, and you can apply that to so many things in life. Like when you break down life, like we're pretty much doing the same cycle over and over again in every single thing we do.
Yeah. Wow. As we wrap up, I've got a few questions. We had a few people send some in, but what is it for you guys? Like, where do you think we said it before, like the legacy piece for you guys, like where do you want to take Reno Inspo, or like for you guys, does this want to be a full-time thing for you guys, or?
I would happily do this full time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Here's
the thing though. Okay, but I think it would be the perfect balance if Michael did it full time and I didn't, because my strengths are the project management, the budgeting, and the selections. That's not a full time job.
Yeah.
When you're if you're doing it for other people, sure, but I don't have any desire to do it for other people. I'm more passionate about my day-to-day business.
Yeah, love it.
But for us, that's not a full-time job. The stuff that Michael needs to do, like being on site, jumping in with the trades, making decisions on the fly, picking up things, all of that stuff. Like, and when we do smaller renos, like he's physically on the tools still. Like he'll bring in trades to help with plumbing and electrical and all the things that you're not meant to do yourself, but he'll do most of the stuff himself. Like, I'm useless on the tools, right?
Yeah.
You know, like I'm much better in front of a computer than I am, you know, on a saw or something. So, so for me, it's just about sawing with your strengths, and like my strength is on that kind of back end side, and Michael's is on the front end side. So that's why I'm really comfortable not doing it full time. But for us, like, Reno Inspo was an accident. Like, the Reno projects were intentional, but the kind of creating a platform, we just did it because we'd moved back from overseas and we had so many friends and family all over, and we're like, we're doing this cool project, like let's share that and capture it. And I guess like we were just sort of surprised when like people we didn't know started following us, and then it got like bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've never treated it like something we're trying to grow for us, because lots of people do, and I support that 100%, because lots of people have used their home Instagram as like a platform to start businesses. Like a lot of our clients have done that, and it's amazing, and I'm so proud of them and what they've achieved. But for us, it's like that's like our creative outlet, our fun. So we kind of don't really apply a lot of our business stuff to that, because when it's a business, like it starts to feel like a job, and we like the renos for us right now is like our hobby. And so we want it to still feel like a hobby. So for us, like now, we love helping other people. So like we want to use our platform to help others like do what we've done, but not in a paid capacity. And we want to continue to share our projects. Like we've got another super fun one coming up that we're excited to share, and I'm sure it won't be the last. That's I don't know if you've got anything else.
I think that's the perfect legacy
for
us.
I love that, just genuinely wanting to add value and help people, you know, creating a really good impact. And it's really inspiring what you guys are doing. And key thing I took away from there was around not only the legacy piece, but more so the strengths and weaknesses. I really like that. So there's a lot of couples or individuals that but I see a lot of like families getting into this space, and they're doing really well. They might have done their one or two and they're getting there. Or I see a lot of one's a tradie and the wife's a interior design background, or like
it's the best combo. We're so jealous of those people.
But what I'm hearing is you can do really well when, again, you treat it like a bit of a project, is a business, because at the end of the day, you're there to profit as well, right? Like any business, you're there to profit, make impact, but profit. So it sounds as though you've found your strengths within the team. Like if you treated each project as a team, you've highlighted right there. So key tip there for anyone looking to get into the project space, if you're doing it with a spouse or a family member or a friend, have a think who's doing what, where's the role clarity coming into this project, because you can't do it alone, right? You need 100%. People. Yeah.
And the two other things I'd say about that, you can't teach a fish to climb a tree, right? So if it's not a strength of yours, don't try and force it, because you're not going to enjoy it. And like fun thing about renos is like that it's fun, right? It's like, yes, you're doing it to make money, but you want to actually enjoy the journey, and you're not going to enjoy the journey if you're trying to do something you're not good at. And in the beginning, sometimes you have to make sacrifices, but like I suck at painting, and every time I paint, like somebody has to go repaint it. So I just don't paint anymore, like, you know. But I would also say meet amazing trades and people, because like we have now got so many trades who we consider friends, and when we're doing projects, like we pick up the phone and they'll come and help us do like jobs outside of hours and stuff like that, because we've got a really good relationship with them and we love them and they're incredible, and like they help us so much. So it is knowing your strengths, but it's also building a great network around you. And that comes from meeting people, asking friends from recommendations. Like we don't know any tradies. Like none of our direct friends were tradies. Like they became our friends because they were our tradies, not they were our friends that were tradies. So
unreal.
Yeah.
Network's your net worth, right?
Exactly.
100%.
Love that. As we finish, I just had a few quick fire kind of questions. A few people sent a few things through. First one is, what room in the house would you not overcapitalize in? Love that question.
That's a great question. Maybe we have different answers. Like I feel like for me, a lot of expense can go on things you don't see. So it's maybe not an answer to a room, but like we always go cheap on things like internals for wardrobes. Like whereas like I've seen people spend a lot on that, and we're like, we go cheap on that.
Getcha.
You know, get what we want, but cheap. And even things like tile selections, you know, we'll find beautiful tiles that are super expensive, And then we'll go find the
Try
cheap
and
dupe.
find something
Like,
that
you know,
look-
and
yeah.
when I say cheap dupe, still we always go for quality, but like sometimes.
From a visual aspect,
Exactly. Like you don't need to have that. So I don't know for me if it's a specific room, but it's more like kind of.
Piece it, yeah.
Yeah, like making sure you get it. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think it's very easy to overcapitalize on beautiful things like tiles, bench tops, cabinetry, that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of the value actually comes from the quality of the craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Because you could have really expensive tiles
That's
and a
very
shit
true.
tiler that does a bad job, or you could have
Oh, yeah.
average or good-looking tiles with an immaculate tile job that look amazing.
Very
so
true.
I think shifting some of that budget from the product and putting it into your trades is not a bad way to go.
And you made me think of something as well, Michael, that also like that whole going for form over function. Like a lot of people spend a lot on design elements, but they don't get the actual floor plan design well. And so what really adds value to your home is like getting that right. Like if you're in an area where people always want a second living room, having a second living room, you know, one property we added a ton of value because we turned this disgusting storage cupboard into an office. Like, you know, because we knew it was during COVID and people
Working from
like
home.
were working
Yeah,
from
I love
home. And
that.
so for me, you know, it's a lot of the time the smart decisions around money are not made on selections, they're made on the floor plan.
Wow, great points there. Floor plan is a big one. Yeah, you can't change that. I really liked your one around the trade quality because I obviously work with a lot of buyers. Here with the feedback, they'll tear property apart if it's not well done in terms of trade quality. You're exactly right. Sometimes they can't tell the difference in the visual, but they can see if something's been chonky. Hey,
Totally. That's what our experience was and what made us build, because we were looking at homes that were over $1 million and like they like forgot to leave a spot for the light switch, and so then they just put like a chunk of wood that was still like raw and then painted it, and we're like this makes no sense. Like that was just that's one example, but there was hundreds of just like what were you thinking opportunities.
Such a good tip, that one. Such a good tip. You guys, we've heard how you met through the mum.
Yeah.
Love that. Just a quick one on marketing, like for your people, as I said, you guys seem to be doing it just for value adding, but there are people wanting to boost profile with their properties online. What's your key tip on, I guess, exposure on social media?
Yeah, so for us, like I said, that was never the goal. But for our most recent property we sold, when we were signing the contracts at the end, the new buyer was like, "I'm so excited! I've bought my dream house," and I knew it was my dream house because I kept seeing it everywhere. And then I was following you on Instagram and did it. So I think it absolutely plays a part into it. And I had lunch with a friend a few days ago and we were talking about how she got a huge price for her property because she had like built such a great profile around her property and turned it into a photo shoot location. So it had business value to the property as well. So I think it's huge. And I think if you have the inclination and you're happy to share your property journey, I think you have such a huge opportunity to do it to help for sale, to do it to turn it into a photo shoot location, Airbnb, even just getting collaborations. Like a lot of people will sort of become influencers through their home products. Like we see so many people and, even our own clients that leverage their kind of home Instagram account to start some kind of business or use it to sell their property. So I would absolutely recommend it if that's your goal and vision. It wasn't ours. It was kind of a unintended positive consequence, but if it is, go for it.
I love it. And just to dive in on that, like what's your biggest tip to how do you have any metric on how consistent you are with promoting things or on store? Like you guys from the outside seem pretty consistent. Or it's just because you love it. Just because you love it.
Honestly, don't follow what we do on our Insta because it's not what I'd recommend. Only because, like I said, that's our hobby. So we just do it. Like it's very much like when we feel inspired, we share stuff. If we were treating it more like a business, we would be way more consistent. So the tips I would give you around kind of growing your profile on social media is, number one, you do need to be consistent and show up. Number two, you do need to build authentic relationships. Like a lot of what's going wrong on social media right now with the proliferation of AI and just kind of general content, there's a massive overwhelm of content. And, you know, to be a flamingo and stand out in a sea of seagulls is really difficult. And the way that you can cut through that is actually build authentic relationships. And for us, when we started out our account, that's what grew our account, was we built authentic relationships with other people that were building, and then they would share our account and we would share their account. And it was never, hey, let's do this to grow our following. Like there was never that. It was just a genuine, like we love each other, like let's
you
help
win, we win.
Yeah, let's
Win-win.
and I think that is still really the key. Like, of course, like I could go and teach you boost strategies and content strategies. We could do a whole nother podcast on that. But I really think if you want to get to the core of it, it's like be consistent and show up authentically and build real
100%.
relationships.
That's gold. That's absolute gold. And just to finish, mindful of time, there's been so much value in this one. It's crazy. For you guys, tips to, I always like to finish. What's your biggest tips? We're in 2023 right now, moving on the back end into 2024. Interest rates are on hold. The market you guys deal in is at Southeast Queensland, predominantly Gold Coast, blue chip. What's your tips to buyers out there who are maybe looking at the market as a whole in terms of wanting to buy? Like any key tips there for buyers back end of 2023?
I think it comes back to some of the things we touched on before. I'd be factoring in more rate rises. I'd be factoring in a little bit of
Have
fat
your buffers,
there,
yeah.
have some buffer there.
Love it.
Hopefully you don't need it, but better
hopefully
to
you don't, but you don't want to be on the wrong side of that.
100%.
And looking to add value, and whether that's value in terms of growth areas that are growing, or add value in terms of what can you add to that property to extract more value by like either increasing the footprint or doing renovations. Like where with that, if you look at a property with that lens on, like where's the value, it makes it easy to evaluate different property options.
Yes.
I would
love
agree.
It.
The only other thing I would add is also just like what's your timeline? Because if you're looking to get in and out quick, I think you could be in a bit of a danger zone in the next couple of years.
Super risky.
So then you really need to look to add that value. If you're looking for your forever home, like our most recent home, like I feel comfortable with you were there at the auction, Matt. I feel comfortable with what we paid, and we've had it valued at above what we paid. But we went higher than what we really wanted to, but we knew it's a long-term thing again for us. So for us, we're like, we're not going to lose that house over 40 grand, because 40 grand over the course of 10 years is nothing. And so we didn't care, but we've had other people we know who have bought kind of in the last, 12, 18 months, and they're now going, oh gosh, I think my house might be worth less than what I paid. And they're really panicked about it. So I think it's exactly what Michael said, but also just knowing like what's your timeline and what do you want to do out of it, because sometimes there's a time where you're like, screw it, let's like pay a little extra, and there's a time where you're like, let's be more prudent here if we want to get in.
If you got the wrong strategy in the wrong market, you're going.
Yeah.
You're going to be.
I just love that last little tip, because it's a big one. The timeline's huge, because if you're skimping over a few grand when you're scheming over a decade, if you're buying in a good location, you'll be kicking yourself. Kicking yourself. And you're exactly right. If you are planning short flip, long, there's so many different aspects to the timeline. That's a really good tip to finish on, is have a look at your timeline going into the deal and make a decision off that, rather than that emotion, heat of the moment. And I'm with you. There's been so many buyers I've spoken to where they're absolutely kicking themselves. They got caught in the emotion, not the long-term vision. And I think that's the overarching thing for today is I love the delayed gratification, the patience, but always seems like you guys have a vision with everything. So stacks of value in that one. Toni and Michael, Bache. Yep, Bache. Is it Bache or Bache? Bache.
You had it.
Bache. I had it first time. Jeez. Follow their journey. The reason I love following these guys is not only the insight, they do provide a ton of value for free, but it's authentic. I think you nailed it on the head. It's actually authentic, and you can tell some of the tips you've given in there. I've been noting down, I'm on my own journey as well. So I really appreciate that. And really appreciate your time coming in, and super excited to see what's next for you guys. I know where you're at. That's not the forever home. You guys are bouncing
we
around.
always joke it's like the forever in inverted home, because nothing's forever when it comes to us.
Love it. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.